Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Tundu Abiola.
And I'm Biola Labi.
It has been exactly a week since a member of the Nigerian police shot and killed a young man by the name of Kolade Johnson in Lagos. According to reports, Johnson was shot by one Inspector Ogunyemi Olalekan of the Special Anti-robbery Squad while watching a football game at a viewing center. The police officer, who has admitted culpability for the crime, is currently in detention, awaiting prosecution. This latest murder is being seen as one too many across Nigeria and has once again brought the relationship between the police and the Nigerian public under a lot of scrutiny. For more perspective on this incident and more, we are being joined by Betty Abah, founder and executive director of CEE-HOPE, an NGO that focuses on the rights and welfare of vulnerable people. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
So where is this nexus between vulnerable people and extrajudicial killings? Why have you taken an interest in that as well?
Okay, we work generally with vulnerable people, especially young people and children in particular. Of course, you know that when people are vulnerable, people think that they can be taken for granted, either in the cases of sexual violence or in this case, under view here, of extrajudicial killing. The police, the people in authority, and people around them who tend to have some kind of power, some kind of influence over them, feel that they can always get away. And it is, they can always get away with any crime, any assault, any violation of the person because they have that certain power, they have that certain privilege. And this is more so in Nigeria, where the judiciary is weak, where people get away with blue murder every single day. So it's very, very prevalent because people get away and people are not adequately punished enough to serve as deterrence. So people tend to exert some kind of power, some kind of influence over the nearest person. When you have a house help in the house, of course, you know that the house help comes through an agent. You don't even know where the person comes from and you don't care. So you feel you can beat up the house help. You feel you can sexually abuse the house help. Perhaps even kill the house help and get away because you always know that the people in charge of law enforcement agents, especially the police, are easily compromised. So with that in mind, the vulnerable becomes more vulnerable and people who have power over them, by the day, they tend to grow in that power, in that influence.
So if we look at this case of Kolade Johnson's tragic murder, the police officer in question has been dismissed from the police force and he's to be prosecuted for murder. Are you satisfied with this outcome so far?
I'm not. I'm impressed by the Lagos State Police Command, especially in the prompt way, the swift way they got into action, got the culprit arrested, dismissed, and he's about to be prosecuted. I think that was very impressive, but I'm not totally satisfied. How many more persons have been killed? How many more young men have been killed in this country and nobody knew about it? This, I think to some extent that they were compelled to do this in a swift way because there was so much media publicity around it. On social media, there were a lot of campaigns, justice for Kolade Johnson and all of that. Supposing it had happened somewhere in Zamfara, in Otukpo, in Benue State, in Abeokuta, would that have been possible? So there are thousands and thousands of young Nigerians, especially young men, who have been killed by police officers and nothing happened. I think the prevalent thing, the common thing is for the police officers to be transferred when this happens. So when other police officers see that nothing actually comes out of this, that there are no consequences for such killing, for such violation, they are emboldened to continue. So it's because it's in Lagos, and then there's a lot of media scrutiny.
I want us to take a step back and talk about SARS for a minute, because there has been, at almost every level of society, community, government, there has been there's a huge distrust between the community and SARS. There's a huge, there's been even internationally rebuking of SARS action. Amnesty International has said that SARS is violating people's human rights. Tell us a little bit about what SARS is meant to be and why SARS is actually failing on its mandate.
But SARS was not responsible for this killing. This was anti-cultism squad.
This is the anti-cultism squad.
Yes, special anti-cultism.
But SARS has been under a lot of scrutiny.
Yes, so it's always SARS.
I want to take it back.
Yes, the
so
most bloody.
I want to take it. Yeah, that's why I wanted to just take a look at SARS.
Yes.
Besides this, I mean, this is the anti-cultism, but just SARS and.
I think, like I was about saying, the most bloody, the most brutal crime against the people, crimes against humanity committed by armed forces, maybe apart from the army, is SARS. In the police force, it's been SARS. And rather than protect people from armed robbers, they tend to be a form of, they've constituted themselves into a sort of terrorists. To the people, the very people they were supposed to intimidate and to actually kill, which is very, very wrong. And I'm really, really disappointed in the government, in the police force, that they've not really made good examples of some of these people that have violated people, that have intimidated a whole population, the populace. They've not really shown that there's law and order when it pertains to SARS. I give you an example. Something happened last year. I was told about a young man who was just coming from a night vigil in the morning. He just stopped over somewhere. And then a couple approached him and said, "You were one of the 4 armed robbers that came to my house 3 days ago. You stole my laptop and 2 phones." And he said, "No, I don't know you. I'm just coming from church." To cut the long story short, this was a setup, and this has been going on between SARS and the couple somewhere around Alagbado in Lagos. And this boy was taken to the SARS office in Ikeja and tortured. His mother was called, his church members were called. And they said, "This boy just left church. He's innocent. He doesn't even know what you're talking about." And they continued torturing him. At the end of the day, he was taken to Kirikiri. He was branded an armed robber. The cruise of the matter was that he refused to give them, I think they asked him to give him, is it 360,000 as the cost of the stolen items? And when we were called in, he had spent almost 3 months in Kirikiri. He was being dragged to court every single day. And there were so many people in Kirikiri. Right now, some are still there. But we brought his issue to social media, we called the press and all of that, and at the end of the day, he was acquitted. And when he got out of Kirikiri, out of the maximum prison, he already had a perforated eardrum, he had a broken shoulder, he had been tortured, a completely innocent person. And when I talked to the lawyer who was handling the case initially, she told me that she was actually handling 2 cases with similar accusations. So SARS collaborates with persons around the bus stop, around AIT, around Agbado, and they just swoop down on random people, random individuals, and then accuse them. And once you're able to produce the money, they leave you to go. Or at least you settle.
Do you think SARS has outlived its usefulness?
I think it has outlived its usefulness. When at the climax of the End SARS campaign last year, we're thinking that SARS was going to be disbanded. But what they did was more of reorganization.
Yes.
So the old sheep, the black sheep, are still very much in the system, and nothing has been done to really fish them out and cleanse the system. So we are still very much faced. We're faced with the threat of SARS. We're faced with the threat of a unit of the police force that's supposed to protect the citizenry, but which has constituted itself into a terrorist organization.
I know 2 people personally who were picked up by SARS randomly, disappeared, their family could not reach them. Exactly the story you related. 2 people. So I think a lot of people have personal encounters with this.
The boy was actually lucky to be out.
Yes.
He narrated examples of persons who were tortured to death in that process. And people keep being killed every single day.
So you made mention earlier about young men being targeted. Let's discuss that, because that is what tends to happen. People that I know are young men. One was leaving work in Computer Village and picked up. His family did not know where he was. Another one, like you said, coming from church, picked up, disappeared for weeks. Nobody knew where to find him. Why are young men being targeted? In this story of the tragic passing of Christopher Kolade, you'll recall that there was a young man called Idris with dreadlocks who was actually the target of the operation. And his claim is that it's simply because of how he looks, that he has dreadlocks. He did nothing. How do you respond to that?
I think it's so tragic that our young men are the target of SARS. you know, they tend to work under the guise of they are trying to track Yahoo boys. I don't know who actually gave them that mandate to be tracking down Yahoo boys, and in the course of it, harassing innocent citizens. One of our staff members was also picked last year. He was in an Uber cab, and then he was picked. He was stopped on the road and picked. And the SARS officer pointed a gun at him and said, if you don't give us money, we're going to kill you. They had to follow him to the ATM, and he withdrew all the money he had in the ATM, 30,000 naira. There are so many cases. It's not just in Lagos, it's across the country. Young, innocent Nigerians being targeted. And I think last week, is it the commissioner of police in Lagos State said, no, the PRO, the police PRO said, actually one of the reasons is that they're targeting people because they have dreadlocks and all of that. And
piercings and tattoos.
Yeah. And then another officer came up, Dolapo, and said, no, nobody should be targeted on account of wearing dreadlocks. So even within the police force, there's a lot of confusion. And we should deal with that. The Nigerian population constitutes over 70% of young persons. Yes. These are the same young persons that are jobless. These are the same young persons whose future is very bleak. And then these are the same young persons that are being brutally murdered. So how do we expect these young persons to stay in Nigeria and build the country if they are not safe, if they are being criminalized, if they are indeed being killed?
Can I ask you, why do you think that comment was made about dreadlocks, piercing, tattoos? And is it that the police force needs to be educated that these things are not a sign of cultism or
delinquency?
I think they know. They just try to exploit some sentiment, societal sentiment. When you see people with dreadlocks, piercing, you know, they look a little bit different. So they tend to exploit that societal sentiment. They know very well that they are not. Many artists, many writers, many musicians tend to look that way, many creative persons, and they are a blessing to the society. There's nothing wrong with looking that way if you choose to look that way, as long as it does not constitute a harm to the next person. They know very well that these people are not criminals, but they try to exploit the general sentiment, to try to extort money, to try to intimidate them, and to try to extract power.
What do you say to the police who said that they had to constitute this anti-cultism squad in that area where they were that day of that operation, because there are areas in Lagos that have high cult activities, and that their efforts are actually to protect people?
But I'm not sure that anyone gave them an order to shoot at sight.
This is the thing.
Yes, even if you think the person is a cult person.
He shot in the air. The inspector said he shot in the air. Who shoots in the air? If you shoot in the air, the bullet is going to land somewhere.
It's going to land somewhere, and it may land on people.
Yes.
So I think they are power drunk. And like I said earlier, the very fact that they are not held to account, the very fact that they have killed so many people and there have been no consequences. Who knows whether this Inspector Kolade, whether this is the first time he's killing someone? They will tell you that they will waste you and nothing will happen. And as long as there are no consequences, as long as nothing happens, they'll keep killing. So Nigeria is simply...
With Apple 6, for example.
Apple 6, yes. And that was just because it got into the media. There are so many that happens every day. Boys are picked up in Benue State, for instance, on the guise of they're being caught boys. And without trying them, when they're being taken from Otukpo, for instance, to Makurdi along the way, they're wasted. Young boys. Even if you think these boys are caught boys, even if you think these boys they are suspects, there's still room for improvement. There's still room for transformation. There's still room for change, because these are impressionable young people who have been misguided, perhaps, and they can be changed. By extrajudicially killing people, you leave no room for repentance.
None.
And you just terminate, you just estimate a life. You just terminate an entire life with all the prospect, with all the dreams, with all the future ahead of that person. And as long as the government, the police, does not exert its power that this should be a country of law and order, that you cannot just go out of your way and kill another human being. You do not have the power simply because you have a gun or a uniform. You do not have the power. Nobody sent you on that errand. As long as government does not put its foot down and make scapegoats of as many people as violated the rules of engagement, as many people have terminated innocent life, as many people have committed crimes against humanity, as long as they continue to be transferred to the next police station, as long as the police continue to cover up the crimes, so long young people in this country will continue to be endangered.
What do we need to do? So there's government action, but there's citizen action, which really was what you said, I mean, sort of has been one of the things that's turned the tide, is that this overwhelming response of citizens on social media and really personal stories. People will keep on telling their personal stories with SARS. And then SARS is, I mean, sort of anti-SARS movement. And then there's also been quite a number of anti-SARS activists.
I think there have been this SARS, end-SARS movement on social media led by SEGA, which has been very, very effective, which has been very overwhelming. People have been calling
SEGA every time something happens.
He was a guest on the show. He's so passionate during the week.
And it's created a very serious consciousness, a general national consciousness. And I think it's going to go a long way. And especially now in the age of social media, people are very quick to put things like that on social media. So there's really no hiding place. As people are aware of their rights, and there's a venue, there's a medium to express, there's a medium to expose some of these atrocities, I think that we're going to see changes. Even if government is not disposed to end these atrocities against citizens, innocent citizens, I think that the citizens themselves are like wired. They're wired to ensure that change comes around. Look at what happened in Abuja the other time. The officer who was killed by the police, he was going to, I think he was going to drop his children in school. His children were with him, with his wife. The national...
and the man who was dragged by the police.
And you know, once it happened, someone was there videoing the entire process. So there was no denying, there was no hiding for the police. And with time, the suspect was, the culprit was arrested. So as long as people know the power they hold, especially in utilizing the social media, I think so long we're going to keep exposing. So long we're going to ensure that change comes around. And generally, I think that the Nigerian police they are a part of our problem as a nation. This is an agency, this is a unit, this is an organization, this is an institution that's supposed to protect lives. But to so many of them, it's about commercialization of crimes. It's about exerting their weight and intimidating citizens. I was in Makoko, I think Makoko is one of the communities where we work in Lagos with young people, one of the slum communities. And at about 9 p.m., there was a police van passing with a siren. And immediately there was commotion. People started running to their houses, screaming, because the very presence of the police in Makoko is threat. It means death. It means intimidation. It means violation. It means brutality. Everybody started running. I said, please, enter your car and start running. And that was how we fled. They were just passing by. They didn't hurt anyone, but there was a precedence of violence. Just last year, they went around trying to effect an illegal court order. And so many persons were wounded. About 4 young men were shot dead by the police in an area of Makoko. A case that was in court. The people just got around, some powerful persons, got some police, a unit of the police, without the knowledge of the commissioner of police. And they went to the community and started shooting and asking people to be evicted until we raised alarm on social media, drew the attention of everybody, and it was stopped. So there are communities, like you mentioned earlier, that vulnerable community. They are voiceless. They do not have the money to bribe top police officers. They do not have the voice. They may not be able to speak very big English on TV. And they may not have the look, the touche look of someone who should be on air. But they are being, and so the police, the law enforcement agents, exploit this vulnerability and continue to oppress and continue to intimidate, which is a shame, because you're supposed to protect people. People are supposed to feel safe in your presence. People are supposed to feel secured in your presence. But the very thought of you kills, every safety in them. The very thought of you intimidates them. So we should have like I don't know if it's a transformation or a revolution, or I don't know, but something has to give as it concerns the police force.
We have to talk about Ochania, who we discussed the last time you were here. What has happened with her case? Because I'm hearing some disturbing news from Benue State that it's not been properly prosecuted. So if you recall the Ochania case where she was raped by her uncle and her cousin, his son, and died from injuries from that sexual assault.
I think the case is currently in court. My view is that the prosecution team of Benue State, in spite of all the widespread the mobilization, the international publicity and all of that, that they were not really serious. Because as at the time the case went to court earlier in January, the prosecution team had not prepared their case. And I think the case has been in court for like, the first 3 times it was in court, the judge was not around. The judge couldn't bother, he wasn't around. And then they went back, when he was around, they discovered that the prosecution team had not even prepared their case. They had not gathered all the evidence together, which is really, really sad. So now the case has been taken from magistrate to the High Court. And they say they have all the evidence now, the post-mortem report and all of that. And the mother called me, I think, 2 days ago. And I asked her, so what next? When is the next date? And she said there is no date yet, but most likely they are looking at this month. But whatever happens, we are going to ensure that the authorities are held to account. Because that's a young life, a very brilliant, promising young life that was caught short.
So brutally.
Yeah, so brutally. And so we have to make, as a nation, we have to make a statement using Chanya's case that people cannot just get away all the time with crime because you think this person is vulnerable. She's from a poor home and she was brought into the home at the age of 5. From the age of 8, the son started raping her. And when the father discovered, when the sister reported to the father, that was when he discovered that, okay, this guy is rapable. And he also just continued. So for 4 years, no, about 4 years plus, they consistently raped her. Her system just couldn't stand it. That was a young girl.
13.
No, she was just 8 when it started.
No,
so when it was 13, her system just failed.
Yes. They killed her.
And because she was vulnerable, she wanted to be in school. I was in her village earlier in January. The only school there is not functional. Most of the teachers are farmers. So they go to school in the morning, they go to farm in the morning before coming to school because the state government could owe them for 10 months. So they just have to supplement by farming. And so it wasn't functional. So she wanted a functional educational system. That was how she stayed back. Yeah, that was how she stayed back with all that was happening to her. She just wanted to be in school. And at the end of the day, she lost her life. Just the quest to be in school.
Yes.
Wow. Betty, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I pray that you continue to do the work you do and God continues to give you the energy and the boldness to continue to do what you do because what you do is what we need more people to do in Nigeria.
Thank you so much. And I believe that together we'll make Nigeria great again.
Amen.
We'll speak truth to power and bring about change as a collective force.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
And this brings us to the end of the morning show today. Thank you for watching. I'm Biola Alabi.
And I'm Tundra Abiola. From our entire team here in Lagos, Nigeria, enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your day. Goodbye.